As news continues to come out about the Commanders' search for their new defensive coordinator, new offensive line coach Darnell Stapleton has had some old clips resurface. What are those clips? Why am I encouraged by them? And how do I feel he will do in his first season as the new O-line coach? What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Full Command Show. My name is Grant Mitchell, back with you all on this Tuesday morning. There are only 3 games of football left until August. That is a depressing statement. If you watch the XFL, the UFL, I'm not even sure when the CFL is in season. Okay, you can get your fix over there. But the good stuff. We had the national championship game last night. Really fun game. Shout out to Indiana and Mendoza and Signetti. What those boys just did is one of the most improbable underdog upsets in sports history. I was actually looking at betting odds early today. There's only been one time that a team opened with longer Super Bowl odds and went on to win the Super Bowl than what Indiana just had. Indiana opened at plus 10,000, which means they had a 1% chance to win. The only time a Super Bowl winner has had longer odds, any guesses? Anyone out there? The Rams in 1999. Never been a bigger upset in the MLB, the NHL, college basketball. Over in the English Premier League, there was Leicester City in 2016. But other than that, Indiana just had maybe the third most unlikely upset in the history of amateur and professional sports. So congratulations to those guys. Thank you for entertaining us. Great season. But again, only 3 games left, and it's going to be pretty soon here. It's going to be time to really jump into the offseason. So once we get towards and after the Super Bowl, February, March, you can really expect the content with the free agency, the trades, the mock drafts, all of that to ramp up. I'm going to try to get some guests on here. I don't know how it's going to go because I'm shooting for the stars on a lot of these, but every time you guys hit the like button and subscribe button, it gives me a little more cachet. So if you want to see some cool people on here, then you can help play a part in potentially doing that by hitting those buttons. In today's video, I've been dancing around it for a while. We are going to talk about some updates from around the league as far as the coaching carousel, all of the hirings, who's coming in for interviews, who's secured new jobs. How does that impact the Commanders' search for their new defensive coordinator? And then we're going to transition and talk about Darnell Stapleton, who is yet another young and inexperienced coach on this Commanders' offensive staff. But after listening to him, he's someone that I'm actually excited by. So we'll jump into all that. Again, guys, if you are enjoying the content, do hit the like and hype buttons. Subscribe if you're new around here. And as always, throw your comments down below. I'll be reading and responding to as many as I possibly can. So we will start with the coaching update, and we'll start with who is most Commanders fans' #1 target for the defensive coordinator position. That is Mr. Brian Flores. Out of curiosity, what is his middle name? I don't know why I want to know that. Brian Francisco Flores. That sounds cool. Yeah, his parents did a good job there. Mr. Brian Francisco Flores. The Steelers are interviewing him for their head coaching job today. Former head coach of the Cowboys, Mike McCarthy, will interview with the Steelers on Wednesday. Presumably after that, the Steelers will be coming to a verdict on who they are going to hire. Chris Shula is in the running. McCarthy is in the running. Flores is in the running. Those appear to be the top 3. Would expect the Steelers to have an idea in mind by the end of the week. I'm not a Steelers insider. That's just kind of my feelings on the matter, but things should be starting to take shape. Now, according to Adam Schefter, Minnesota has been pushing to bring back Flores in the event that he does not land a head coaching job. And according to Schefter, the Vikings have a good chance of retaining him again if he does not land a head coaching job. So as time passes, it seems more and more unlikely that Brian Flores will be in Washington, D.C., even though most people seem to agree that would probably be the best outcome. Elsewhere around the league, the Green Bay Packers defensive coordinator, Jeff Hafley, was hired to be the Dolphins' new head coach, which means the Packers now have an opening at defensive coordinator. And when you have the opportunity to work with Micah Parsons and some of the guys that they have over there, that can certainly be an attractive option. And then down in Tennessee, Robert Saleh was hired to be the Titans head coach. That means that Cliff Kingsbury, who was in the running for a long time, will not be there. However, Mike McDaniel, formerly a Commander's potential offensive target for their offensive coordinator spot, He might be bringing Mike McDaniel with him, that being Robert Saleh. I know that both were in San Francisco. I can't remember if both were there at the same time, but there is certainly some overlap in their circles. It would be a good platform for McDaniel, working with the former first overall pick in the draft, Cam Ward, help him develop, give him set him on the right trajectory, prove to coaches around the league, yes, I can come in and lead a reboot of a franchise. We draft a young quarterback. Yep, I'm the man to come in and get the best out of him. And Mike McDaniel goes on to greener pastures. Cam Ward's got a happy career, and everybody is pleased with where they are. But that's the coaching update from around the league. Let's keep it in the building, and let's talk about Darnell Stapleton. So, I said in the beginning he's inexperienced, and I mean that in the sense that he hasn't been an NFL coach for very long. He was only the Commanders' assistant line coach for 2 years. That was the first time he'd been in the NFL. Before that, he was at Florida, which is obviously a big program, but his stops before that were Bucknell and Sam Houston State and Rutgers, and before that, he was a women's professional football coach, and he was working at a high school. So 40 years old, lots of coaching experience as far as years, never been an offensive line coach in the NFL, but he was the starting guard on the Steelers' Super Bowl winning team in 2008. So the guy knows his football, I will say that at the very least. Whether or not that means he can translate it to coaching properly, coming up with the proper pass protection plans and teaching the techniques and the fundamentals and communicating with people, that's an entirely different question. That's why a lot of great players never become coaches. That's why smart people can't always teach, because you are not judged by what you know, you are judged by what you can communicate to other people, and in the sense of being a coach, getting them to act on what you have communicated, getting them in the right place, getting them in the right spots, having them execute their blocks, and ultimately scoring a lot of points. That's how you judge a good O-line coach. So with not knowing, or rather not having a bunch of evidence on which I could judge Darnell Stapleton, I just went searching. Watch some YouTube videos, coaching clinics, listened to a podcast that he was on, read some old interviews, just to try to learn more about this man and what are his philosophies. Number one is he does seem to be a zone scheme specialist. Florida, when he was there, they were predominantly a zone scheme. I'm going to read you some quotes from him later on, but you can hear him referring to zone schemes as an art and a science. And he just mentioned zone a lot of times. Inside zone, split zone, outside zone. This is his forte. And this lines up with exactly what I was saying when the Bobby Johnson firing occurred. I said, this is practically confirmation. The Commanders are moving to more of that West Coast style of offense with more zone scheme blocking. They wanted to go out and hire a specialist. Now, one thing that I also said was normally when you do that, you go outside of the building to find a specialist. It is rare that you assemble such a young staff from coaches you thought were underperforming. Clearly, they thought Bobby Johnson was underperforming or he wasn't the right guy. They felt Cliff Kingsbury was underperforming or he wasn't the right guy, yet they promoted from within. That's unique. Normally, you go outside the building to find these specialists, but they thought David Blau, they thought Darnell Stapleton were the specialists. And let's jump into some of what Darnell Stapleton preaches to his players. So some general key points for what he said is important to him as a coach. Starting the block correctly, technique, fundamentals, explosion, and finishing with sustained effort. On what he looks for in a player, he said, quote, "As I watch film, I want to see somebody that shows extreme effort." Now that quote about the art and the science. Here is how he described zone scheme blocking and what he looks for and how he just feels about that approach to moving men out of the way. He said, quote, "There's an art and a science to it, and a lot of that comes down to understanding the scheme. The aiming point of the running back where the ball can end up because of the front, and that's about as a 4D player, understanding the logistics of every scheme and detail that we have." Now this quote really got me fired up. He said, "You got to have the details and the fundamentals before you can unleash the violence." I'll say that again. You got to have the details and the fundamentals before you can unleash the violence. So again, this is a man who played for Mike Tomlin, won a Super Bowl as a starting offensive guard. Violence. That is a part. Yes, there have been thumping defensive backs, Bob Sanders and Sean Taylor and Cam Chancellor. They were roaming around out there. Ray Lewis and all your hard hitters over the middle of the field. But the most violent people on a football field are the 330-pound, 350-pound dudes who run into each other, and it's raw, it's brutish, it's going back to caveman times. It's two guys locking arms and saying who can throw the other one out of the way. That's violence. So he recognizes the importance of that, which does fit in with the whole run and hit style, physical, tough that Dan Quinn wants to be about. But I loved that first part. You got to have the details in the fundamentals because he's correct. The players have to be going to the right spots. Now, I don't know if anybody here, if you've ever trained for a marathon, if you've ever worked your way back from an injury, if you've ever started calisthenics, if you ever started swimming, if you ever started dance, gymnastics, football, literally anything. If you've got something in your head and you're thinking about it too much, you can't get to full speed because you're worried, oh, am I making this mistake? Oh, am I doing this correctly? So that's the technique and the fundamentals piece of it. We have to be so aligned in what we're doing. There has to be such clarity with what's going on that everybody knows that where they should be. Once we have that in place, that's where we bring out the violence. And myself, numerous other Commanders people and insiders and just analysts that I trust, a lot of us have been saying the same things. You look at this Commanders offensive line, it is built to leverage some of their athletic talents by getting them into zone scheme work, where we're running down the line, we're using our speed, we're using our strength and our athleticism, and we're moving people out of the way. That feeds into the strengths of Bill Krosky-Merritt predominantly. I still don't know that C-Rod is great for zone scheme offense, but we'll see, especially if David Blau does a nice job mixing it up with some power blocking. But Bill running down the side, stretching the defense, wait for that hole to open up, one cut, burst through it. It just seems like it's a match made in heaven for everybody involved. Now, Darnell Stapleton did also speak about how he gets the most out of his linemen. He said, quote, "I'm really big on the players understanding the running backs' aiming points, front decorations, combinations, how we combo, and ultimately the technique and fundamentals of our aiming point relative to the running back." Now, I didn't get to hear very much of him speaking because it's not exactly like there's tons and tons of first-time offensive line coach in the NFL giving master classes before. You know what I mean? And if that stuff does exist, it's normally behind paywalls. But from what I could hear of him, I was extremely impressed by the detail and the nuance that he was able to deliver in a succinct and digestible manner. So me personally, I'm more on the visual side of learning. Experiential as well. I learn best by doing it, but I certainly learn a lot better by seeing things than I do from just hearing them. That's just the way that my brain works. Everybody's got different preferred manners of learning. But I was doing nothing other than listening to him talk. I was actually listening while the national championship was on. I was listening to podcasts. It was a YouTube video. I could have looked at visuals, but I didn't because I was watching the game. And I was able to follow along very, very thoroughly and very clearly with what he was saying without needing those visual elements. So considering a coach's job is to teach, coaches are teachers. If he could have me understanding on the first listen without any visual elements, and granted, things are so much more complicated than what he was going to talk about in these videos, right? Okay. Yes, he was going over how to block inside zone, and he was going over how to slant and backside responsibilities and things like that. It gets a lot more complicated. He's got to come up with pass protections and things like that, and protection plans. But if I was able to understand it, that's a very promising sign to me, because we do have Josh Connolly, who is a rookie. Is going to be a sophomore, but was a rookie this season. We have Sam Cosmi, who is still, got some game experience, game freshness back under his belt, but he was working back from a torn ACL. We are either having a former 7th round rookie at left guard, or we're having a new addition to the offensive line, or it's Brandon Coleman, who is going into his 3rd year, but would actually be his first time playing guard all the way through if things pan out. So being a teacher, especially with a young offense and a young staff, is going to be very important. but just listening to him talk, he gives me the impression that he is. So I want to make this clear, and I want to beat this home. I do not feel great about the Stapleton and Blau hires. I don't feel bad about them. I don't feel anything. I am excited. I can't feel positively. I can't feel negatively because I have no evidence off of which I can judge them. If I go listen to other judgments, if I listen to what Ben Johnson said, if I listen to Darnell Stapleton, his talk in these podcasts and stuff, yes, I can tell you what my belief is. I don't have evidence. None of us have evidence. So I'm just excited, and I will continue to beat that point home. That's what I got, though. Before I get out of here, this is like nothing to do with the Commanders at all. It's just some DMV news, and I guess it's a little bit relevant because the Commanders are moving out of Maryland to DC in 2030. They're building the Las Vegas Sphere. They're putting that in National Harbor. Seriously? Oxon Hill, Maryland is going to become a popular concert venue. I don't even really know what goes on in the Sphere. Concerts do go on, but are there like circus shows and other things like that? That's crazy. I saw that it was supposed to create something like $200 million or something or another and 4,700 jobs. It might be cool. I guess it's cool at the very least. I'm probably going to go check it out. Apparently, it's supposed to generate more tax money than having the Commanders in Maryland ever did. So, I don't know. Maybe it's a good thing, but just some local DMV news for those who are interested. It's supposed to go right by MGM. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Appreciate y'all joining me, rocking out here. Do hit the like buttons and the hype buttons if you enjoyed the content. Subscribe if you are new around here. Again, every new subscriber that we get gives me a little more, I don't want to say cachet again. I was trying to think of a new clever word since I already said cachet in this video, but gives me a little more cachet as I reach out to these people and try to get them on the channel. But anyway, that's going to do it for this video. Appreciate y'all joining me, and I'll catch you in the next one. Have a great day. Chew with me.